All right, let's dive right in. Today we're talking about something that is incredibly difficult. What it takes to survive when infidelity isn't just a one-time thing, but a reoccurring nightmare. This is a journey that starts with trauma, but believe it or not, it can end in a profound transformation. So let's start by really understanding the kind of pain we're dealing with here.
This quote, man, it just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? That feeling when you've put in the work, you've cried the tears, you've started to maybe, just maybe, trust again, and then it happens again. It makes everything you did, all that effort, feel like a joke. It's just a completely devastating kind of pain.
So let's get into why this hurts on such a deep level. When cheating happens over and over, it's not just another broken promise. The experts are really clear on this. It's a very specific and severe kind of trauma, and it can literally break your sense of reality.
And that phrase, turning your reality upside down, isn't being dramatic. The person who's been betrayed starts to question everything. Were any of the good memories real? Was I a fool this whole time? How could I not have known? That loss of trust in your own judgment can sometimes feel even worse than losing trust in your partner.
Therapists actually have a name for this. It's called an attachment injury. Think about it. The one person on the planet who is supposed to be your safe harbor, your secure base, has now become the source of your greatest danger. It hits on our most basic, primal fear of being abandoned. It's a wound to the very core of your bond.
And the trauma is so real, so intense, that some researchers have started calling the response post-infidelity stress disorder, or PISD. Why? Because the symptoms look almost identical to PTSD. Just look at this list. Hypervigilance, constantly checking phones, feeling on edge, intrusive thoughts you just can't shake, deep, deep shame. This isn't just being heartbroken. It's a full-blown psychological crisis.
And get this, it's not just in your head. There's real biology at play. A secure, loving relationship literally floods our brain with feel-good chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. But betrayal? It's like someone just turns off the tap, cold. That crash is so powerful that neurologically it looks a lot like the withdrawal an addict goes through. That's why this pain feels so physical, so completely all-consuming.
So of course, that leads to the million-dollar question, why? Why does this keep happening? Now let's be crystal clear about something right up front. Understanding the why behind this behavior is not about excusing it, not at all. The responsibility, 100% of the time, lies with the person who broke their promise.
Time and time again, therapists who work in this area will point to a core driver, an unmet need. Maybe it's a need for feeling desired, or for emotional intimacy, or for sexual adventure. But, and I have to say this again because it is so important, even if a relationship has problems, even if there are unmet needs, it is never, ever the fault of the person who was betrayed. The other person always had other choices, always.
Now this is a really fascinating way to look at how a mistake becomes a pattern. The philosopher Immanuel Kant gives us a framework. A one-time affair might be driven by what he called affect. An impulse, an unthinking reaction to a feeling. But repeated infidelity, that often moves into the realm of passion. And that's different. That involves thinking, planning. It's a conscious choice that over time literally erodes a person's character. And that's the scary part, right? It's when this specific mindset takes hold. A person starts to believe the rules just don't apply to them. They become masters of blaming everyone else, their partner, their job, their childhood. It's why just hearing "I'm sorry" means absolutely nothing after a certain point. As one expert put it, sorry is as sorry does. If you don't dig up the root of the problem, the pattern is almost guaranteed to continue.
So, with all of this on the table, we have to ask the toughest question of all. Can a marriage, can any relationship actually survive this? Can it heal and become healthy? The answer, honestly, is a pretty sobering one.
Yeah. Let's just let that sink in for a minute. Less than 50%. But what does that number even mean? Well, according to a top couples therapist specializing in this, we're not just talking about couples who stay together. No. This is the percentage of couples who finish therapy and manage to build a relationship that is genuinely happy and healthy. Plenty more might stay together out of fear, or for the kids, or for financial reasons, but less than half actually manage to transform the relationship into something good again. Okay, so that statistic can feel pretty bleak, I know. But here's the flip side. If some couples do make it, that means it's possible. It means there's a path. So the real question becomes, what's the difference? What separates the couples who succeed from the ones who don't?
So what's the secret sauce? Well, therapists say it comes down to a few critical, non-negotiable things. First, the unfaithful partner has to be willing to be brutally, completely honest. Second, both people have to be 100% committed to the hard work ahead. Third, the person who cheated has to show real remorse and take full responsibility. No more excuses. And finally, both of them have to be willing to take a hard look in the mirror and be open to changing themselves.
Okay, so let's say a couple has all that going for them. They're ready to do the work. What does that work actually look like? Well, it's definitely not a quick fix. It is a long, difficult, and very intentional process.
All right, rule number 1. The absolute foundation of any hope for recovery is something called full disclosure. This means every single secret has to come out. The worst thing the unfaithful partner can do is something called trickle truth, where they dole out little bits of the story over time. Every new secret that comes out is a fresh betrayal. It's a new D-Day that just re-traumatizes their partner and makes building real trust impossible.
So the healing process really has these core components. It starts with that full disclosure, usually in a therapist's office. Then comes real accountability, which is way more than just saying sorry. It's understanding the why and owning the damage. Next, you have transparency. This is a temporary phase with things like open phone access, not as a punishment, but as a way to help the betrayed partner feel safe again. And finally, down the road, the betrayed partner has to be willing to forgive and not use the past as a weapon forever.
Now, trying to navigate all of this on your own is, well, it's nearly impossible. That's why getting professional help is so often the key. There are proven methods that can guide couples, like the Gottman method, which is all about rebuilding the friendship at the heart of the relationship, or emotionally focused therapy, which helps partners finally talk about those deep attachment needs that were driving the destructive behavior.
And this brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, and honestly, it's the most hopeful part of this entire journey. For the couples who actually make it through this fire, the goal isn't just to patch things up, it's to build something completely new. This right here is the biggest mental shift of all. The couples who come out stronger on the other side realize they can't fix the old relationship. They can't, because that relationship is gone. It died the moment the trust was broken again. Healing has to start with each person individually, and if they decide to come back together, it has to be to create a brand new relationship from scratch.
I absolutely love this quote from a woman who went through this and successfully reconciled. She said, "It wasn't about trying to rebuild or go back, it was about creating a second marriage with the same person." Wow, that just says it all, doesn't it? It's about consciously choosing to build something different, something better from the ashes of the old. And that new foundation, because it was forged in such a crisis, can actually be incredibly strong. It's built on a painful level of honesty that probably never existed before. It's built on a new self-awareness and a mutual respect that was earned to the hardest work imaginable. In a strange way, the crisis becomes the very thing that allows for a much deeper, more conscious connection than they ever had before.
So in the end, it all comes down to this. Whether a couple stays together or decides to go their separate ways, this experience is a wake-up call. It's a call to live a more examined life. It forces you, maybe for the first time, to get brutally honest with yourself about what you need, who you are, and what you want for your future. It's a painful call, for sure, but answering it is where the real healing and the real transformation begins.